Welcome to Jewels of the Trade. My name is Jordan, and I am here with Marco Mazza of Mazza Jade Works, a jade diver and carver in California. Marco, welcome to the channel.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Marco is an underwater photographer and videographer, and he actually took all of the photos that you'll be seeing in this video. Marco, you have such a unique job. Not many people get to scuba dive for a living. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into jade diving and jade carving?
I think jade diving and carving kind of started with my love for the ocean. When I was a young kid, my parents were super tired of me. I was an annoying, high energy little kid, and they signed me up for a surf camp. And, I'd always loved the ocean, but actually being able to be inside of the ocean was incredible. So I took to surfing at a pretty young age up in Northern California, where I grew up. And from there, kind of with that surfing culture comes like the fishing and the diving culture in the area where I grew up. And so around the age of 18, I actually started diving seriously. I'd thrown on a mask and snorkel before, but when I was 18, I actually went up and started abalone diving. Now, that was a free dive only fishery. So um, basically the start of my diving career, even though I got scuba certified shortly after, I started free diving, which is essentially just holding your breath and going down and taking care of whatever you need to take care of down there on one breath. So, yeah, my early years were free diving, all up and down the California coast. But specifically, I fell in love with abalone diving. Abalone were a type of shellfish. I have a shell here. Um, the shell is really beautiful, but the mollusk inside of them was wonderful wonderful food for eating. There used to be a recreational fishery for it. Unfortunately, it's shut down now, but we kind of were on the hunt for the world record, and we never got it, but we got close, and it was a lot of diving up and down the Northern California coast in really cold, really rough, really murky waters. A lot of the big abalones were in places you'd show up and you'd look at this beautiful, clear, crystal cove, and you'd look to the left and there'd be a river mouth and it'd be super rough and murky and everything. And you'd go dive over there because that's where people weren't diving, and that's where you'd find the big abalones. So um, the
So
abalones,
what about the jade diving? Like what does jade diving entail exactly?
well, I kind of came out of abalone diving, and then when I moved to the Central Coast, I'd always found little pieces of jade on the beach. And in Central California, there are jade deposits found in the ocean. It's the only place in the world that has been documented where there's jade deposits in the ocean. And I'd be surfing, looking around, I'd be like, "Oh, hey, there's a little piece, a little nugget on the beach every now and then." And with a diving background, I started free diving for jade, and it uh, was quite difficult. But because of my background and the type of diving I was doing in really cold, rough, murky water, kind of getting in tight places and being comfortable in that kind of more advanced, the more advanced, difficult areas, I was able to kind of take to jade diving, and I found a, a couple good pieces, and it just really got me excited because it was that treasure hunt. If you can't tell, I love being underwater, finding treasure, and jade diving was just another thing along with my photography there. I'm always looking for the next piece of jade, always looking for the next photo to take. It's such a lovely world underwater.
I have to ask the chat, do we have any other jade divers in the chat? Let us know and be sure to join the Jot Discord. The link is in the video description to be part of an international conversation about jade between jade collectors, researchers, sellers, miners, and carvers. For centuries, various civilizations have had their own cultures surrounding the jade economy. California may be one of the more recent jade cultures, so it tends to be lesser known. Marco, what is the California jade culture really like?
The California jade culture is small. There is not much of a jade culture. There's a handful of carvers here in California that are making a living carving. You have Justin Barrett, who's been great in kind of mentoring me. He also dives for his jade. You have Matthew Glasby. you have Ryan Spangler, and you have a handful of other people. But in general, it's a small culture, and everybody's really kind to each other, and really cares for each other, and is always welcoming and giving advice if you're willing to put in the time and effort, and really learn.
Marco, we have a question in the chat from Don Juan. How far does the jade travel? Is it on the ocean floor and just washes up on the beach over time? I think he's wondering where it is when you find it.
The Big Sur coastline is a very uh, kind of rugged coastline. We have 5,000 foot peaks of elevation going straight down into the ocean. And over, millions of years of tectonic uplift and sea level rise and fall and everything, there is jade, that area of natural erosion down at the bottom of the cliffs where the ocean keeps eating away at the cliff. Jade is obviously a very hard material. So as erosion happens, the softer materials will break down over time and the jade will get left. Now, that being said, there's not a lot of it to be left in the first place, but there are laws around only being able to take pieces of jade from the median high tide line and below. So you can find small pieces on the beach. You can find small pieces in the water. There are veins of jade that people have seen in the past underwater, although you are not allowed to mine those.
And
So
those laws are in place to protect the environment,
they're
right? I
there
mean,
to protect the environment,
yeah,
definitely, and the resource itself, because there's not a lot of it. We don't have giant veins of jade coming out of mountains like there may be up in British Columbia. So
sure,
yeah,
sure. It's
it's
such
a
a
really
limited
special thing.
resource. So,
Definitely.
going back to the California jade culture, I wonder if some of the audience members watching this are familiar with the triple Mobius, which I feel is such an icon in the California jade culture. Can you talk about this symbol that's now seen in a lot of American, New Zealand, and even Chinese jade carvings?
Definitely. The triple Mobius, from my understanding, was first kind of brought over here by a carver, a New Zealand carver by the name of Don Salt. His work is phenomenal. You definitely look it up if you haven't. But he came over here and he gave some jade carving lessons and classes to carvers like Gladsby and Barrett. And they kind of took the triple Mobius was a great way to incorporate a lot of jade carving techniques into one design. There's really finite line work. There's folds. There's curvatures. You got to polish inside that little nook in there, and so it's a wonderful design. It's challenging, and it seems to have been a staple among carvers. So as a young carver myself, who's learning from these people who have been very influenced by Don Salt, and myself being influenced by people who were influenced by Don Salt, I always have to give a triple Mobius a try. Every now and then I'll give my own little spin on it. I'll do maybe a little bit of abalone inlay, or I'll maybe hang it a little bit different. But yeah, it's a popular design, and it's really beautiful because it is an infinity ribbon. It folds all the way around. You can follow that plane in an infinite amount of times.
For those who don't know, Marco is an exhibitor at the Monterey Bay Jade Festival that takes place every June in Monterey, California. This year, he had a really exceptional exhibition piece, which we'll be touching on later in this video. So, Marco, diving for jade can't be easy. Can you talk about some of the challenges you face when trying to find actually sellable material in the water?
Yeah, so we have, like I said, a jade source here in Central California. There are only very select areas in which you can find that source. And in those select areas, there is not a lot of it. And unfortunately, the majority of the jade that we have is, well, it's beautiful. It is some of the only jade in the world that's sculpted by the ocean. When you get pieces from, say, British Columbia, you get, it kind of looks like this. It's rough and rugged, like that, or like this. It's not that pretty. And then there's the cut face there until you carve it. But our jade from Central California is ocean polish. So it looks essentially like it may have come out of a rock tumbler. So you can see this is all rounded out and really pretty looking. However, the majority of it, oh yeah, there's a great example on the screen right there. There's some of my best pieces I've found over the years of diving. But in all reality, the majority of those have too many fractures, too many imperfections, or too many soft spots to actually be carvable. So as a diver who's been diving uh, Central California for about 5 years, specifically looking for jade, I've only ever found a couple really high quality carving pieces that even get close to the stuff that you get from Yukon or Wyoming or Siberia or anything like that. So yes, it's beautiful jade because it is sculpted by the ocean, but unfortunately, it's not worth a lot to a carver because the majority of it is very low quality. But that being said, there is really high quality stuff out there. It is just very, very few and far between. And most people that find it are not willing to let go of it because it is so hard to find.
Marco, Don Juan wants to know if you ever hit the Northern California rivers near Shasta for nephrite.
You know, I have never hit the Northern California rivers for nephrite. I have friends that do, but I'm not very well versed on the Northern California river nephrite scene. So I'm unfortunately, I don't want to give any misinformation on that. I'm not very well versed.
You know, I've noticed there do seem to be two separate camps. There's like the divers around Big Sur, and then there's the Northern California nephrite hunters. And it seems to be like completely different realms of expertise, like completely different material.
Oh, it definitely is. You know, in Central California, there's our jade. It's pretty obviously jade most of the time, you know, because that outer rind and that outer layer gets really worn down and tumbled. And as you can see in that photo, you can tell most of those pieces are jade. However, when you get up to Northern California, I've seen some of the most beautiful pieces come out of there, but they look like every other rock until they're cut. You know,
Wow.
the inside of them is can be beautiful, but if I was walking on a riverbed, plus all the rocks up there are dry, so you're looking around and all it's a bunch of dry rocks, and there's like millions of them on the riverbed, and there's miles and miles of river, and you know, in all honesty, unless I had somebody there kind of like guiding me, I wouldn't even know where to start. So yeah, hats off to
Fascinating.
the NorCal guys and the Washington guys doing the river hunting up there. Oh, plus there's again, it's a limited source. There's not a lot of it either, you know. So
Yeah.
you know, I know I've talked to plenty of people who walk for miles and miles and not found a single piece. So yeah, hats off to those guys. They work hard.
Marco, tell us about this photo.
Okay. First of all, I'm very cold and very tired, so bear with me on the photo there. But I shared this photo because that was kind of some of the inspiration behind first falling in love with jade diving. Like I said, I have a very extensive diving background, but I went out there one day and it was really flat. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna leave my spear gun behind and just dive for jade. And I went out and I dove for a couple hours at one location and I didn't really find anything. And then I went to a different location. I hopped in the water and in like 30 minutes, I found that stone. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Like I gotta dive for jade. So I dove for it. It took me probably like 50 something dives and an entire year of actually over a year of diving to even find a stone that came close. So it was total beginner's luck. You know, the stone's nice. It's kind of green and black. It's nothing crazy, but it's ocean polished. And it was just that yeah, it got me excited, you know? And
I
yeah,
have so many questions, Marco. So this is not something I have much of a frame of reference for. Uh, you can dive and dive and dive and not find sellable jade, but you
oh yeah.
keep going back. So I have to know, is it expensive to dive for jade? Is it dangerous to dive for jade? Like, tell us everything. Tell us all the jade drama.
Okay. There are, like I said, there are only a handful of places that you can find jade, and you'll find little pieces on the beach. And you know, we'll find pieces on the beach, and then we'll go dive that spot, and we'll go dive tons of times and not finding anything. So there's actually only a few areas where you can go dive and actually get lucky, and you're almost guaranteed to find like a tiny, tiny, tiny little piece. But as far as finding actual good quality pieces that are worth something, uh, there's a lot of time and effort that goes by. without finding a single piece. I myself, with a handful of years under my belt and great mentorship and a good amount of expertise underwater, I've done almost 50 tanks in a row. And that's tanks, and we're not talking like easy like parking lot entry. We're talking the majority of these spots are you park, you walk either a quarter mile or three-quarters of a mile, whatever, out to the top of a bluff, scale 200 feet down a cliff. There's a kind of a trail, but there isn't much of a trail. And if you're running scuba tanks, that's about 80 pounds of gear on your back, down and up. And you're doing 2 to 3, maybe 4 tanks a day, and it is just, you get beat by the end of the day. And I've done 50 tanks without finding a single A grade piece of jade. I shared this video because that's one of the few videos that that I have of me actually finding a decent piece. That piece is pretty. Again, it was kind of fractured up, so it wasn't jewelry quality, but it was nice and pretty for to put on the mantle.
Th-
But
That is so like eye-opening. I can't even believe it. Now, do you ever stumble upon jade in the water that you can't take? Like it might be like an amazing high quality piece, but you have to leave it behind?
yeah, definitely. Actually, so in the uh 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was kind of a dive boom out there at Jade Cove, was just one of the more popular spots, and that got pretty ran through, unfortunately, back in the day. But the divers went out and they took a lot of the big pieces that were actually attainable to take. So you can find a lot of the time now you're finding the little pieces, or you might run into a piece like the one shown, which is maybe 1,000 pounds and way too big to take. And again, you cannot mine, you cannot take a chisel and hammer down there. It's illegal, and there are always people there watching, especially the locals really look out for the jade culture up there. So and I think even if you were to try to take a hammer and chisel, I don't think you'd get anywhere. It's a pretty solid stone.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are, every now and then you'll run into a piece like that that was too big for people to have taken back in the day. But yeah, a lot of those pieces, those large pieces, were either too big to take, or if they were big enough to take, most of them have been found.
Someone wants to know if you've had any run-ins with apex predators.
you know, I I haven't. I've had two kind of encounters out in the Central Coast, jade diving. So one day I went out with a handful of divers. There's a handful of us that do it fairly frequently, and we went down to the beach. We all kicked out, did our dive. We all come back. We all kind of dive separately, but we all leave at the same time. So if one of us doesn't come in at the same time, we're like, okay, well, we got to search for him now. But anyways, we went out and we came back on the beach just south of us. There was a sea lion that had unfortunately just been attacked by a shark while we were out there in the water. None of us saw the shark, but it was on the beach with a huge bite out of it. Unfortunately, it didn't make it. It was gone pretty soon after it made it to the beach. But that was kind of rattling, because we were all out there, and that sea lion was too, and it made it into the beach. And like when I imagine if you were a sea lion, you get attacked by a shark, you're gonna try to get into the closest beach. So we knew that shark was out in the area. We
Yeah.
were all a little wigged out on our next dive out there. And I also had a moment where um, I was kind of exploring a new area out a little bit deeper, and I went out on the surface. And another friend of mine, Justin, he had gone out maybe 10 minutes before me. He had gone down. I went out there. I went down maybe, I don't know, 50 to 70 yards inside towards the beach of where he was. And I found a stone, and I was kind of getting my stuff set up. The stone was kind of wedged in an area, so I was getting my stuff set up to kind of unwedge it. And he comes over, and his eyes are wide. And now Justin's an uncle. He's a gnarly waterman. He's a big wave surfer. Just thousands and thousands of dives under his belt. He He doesn't get rattled, but he comes over and his eyes are huge. And I'm like, "Oh no." And he just goes like this. I'm like, "Oh, are you kidding me?" And I look at my stone, I look at Justin, and I'm like, "What do I do?" And he's like, and then I'm like, "Oh my God," like he's actually kind of scared, like
You had to leave
something
it
more than just
behind.
a
You have to
shark.
ditch the jade and get to safety.
I
This is
did,
so
yeah, and then
intense. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
but the funny part was I was like, "Justin's rattled," and then he snapped out of it and he goes, "Hold on," and he pulls out his GoPro and he's like flipping through his GoPro trying to show me the video, and meanwhile, there's probably still that shark over there, circling, you know, I'll let him if he wants to tell the story. I don't wanna tell his story on his but he had a very kind of rattling, very close and very prolonged encounter with a shark
Wow.
just outside of where I was. He came in, he purposely tried to find me on his way in to tell me because I was about to make a bunch of noise and draw a bunch of attention to myself. So yeah, I owe him a big one for that. He yeah, he might have saved me there. So that was
Do
my
you
closest
never
encounter.
dive alone? Do you always have to go with other people?
So generally, actually, yes, always in scuba diving and in free diving, you're always supposed to dive with a partner. None of us jade divers dive with a partner, which is really bad. Um, but that is just kind of the way it is. Uh, e- we all understand the risks, and um, like I said, we generally will go down to the beach at the same time. We'll leave the beach at the same time, but we all go our separate ways and we'll all come in around the same time.
Just hope everybody makes it back. Marco, do you wanna tell this
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, so that carving is all Central California or Big Sur Jade. That mola up top, that's a ocean sunfish, a mola mola. And it was inspired by an encounter that I had free diving up at the Sea Ranch in northern Sonoma County. I was spearfishing, and I just want to put it out there that I'm not one. I don't necessarily like the killing aspect, but like harvesting my own food from the ocean is nice. So, anyways, I was spearfishing off this deep reef, off of a pinnacle, in about 50 to 55 feet of water, and I'm on the surface. I kick down. It's just an eerie day. The visibility is terrible. It's like a deep green, overcast. Everything's kind of monotone. There's like weird jellyfish and stuff floating by in the water, and there's like whales off in the distance. It was just kind of one of those days where like it was creepy, murky, and the ocean was very alive. There was a lot of stuff going on. So I kick down, I get to the bottom at about 50 to 55 feet. I'm laying there and I do this thing where I scratch the reef. I just kind of put my head down, scratch the reef. So the fish will get curious. They'll come in, but they don't see me looking at them. I have my head down. Um, and I'm scratching the reef. And out of the corner of my eye, I see like something move and this big shadow go over me. And then I kind of like peer up, and there's this huge gray fin coming, like, I could almost reach out and touch it over me. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like, I pushed it too many times. I'm way the heck out here in the middle of the ocean. I have to come up at some point because I'm holding my breath right now. Like, this is a great white shark. I'm going to die. Like, this is it. I'm going to have to like swim up to the top and it's going to get me on the surface, and all this is running through my head. And I finally like peer up and look. And instead of a great white, it was the bottom fin of a mola mola, the ocean sunfish. And this particular one was huge. It was maybe 7 or 7.5 feet tall, about 5 feet wide or 5 feet long. And I'd encourage everybody to look up a video of one of these swimming. They're very awkward and very funny looking. And I basically went from like down here, like, oh my God, I'm going to die, to no way. That is the funniest looking creature I've ever seen. So that's kind of one of those moments where it really stuck with me because yeah, I legitimately thought I was over. Uh and I kind of drew some inspiration from that moment, diving that outer pinnacle with the big mola circling me, to carve my own mola and kind of have it circling a pinnacle there. So that's kind of a lot of my inspiration for my carving is either drawn from mentors and people that I really look up to and my ocean experiences.
I think jade is not often associated with marine wildlife,
Very
but
true.
if you think of the way the Chinese view their dragon, right? It's like a water creature. A lot of times, like dragons swim in Chinese mythology. And it just kind of makes you wonder about connections over time between jade and pearls culturally throughout history and the water dragon being carved in jade and encounters that you've had. It just kind of makes you wonder about like this unspoken connection between water and jade. Is there a story behind this photo?
Yes. So that is myself having a really good day up at up in the Central Coast. So I there was this stone out at a known spot that had been left for a number of years. Divers had seen it in the past, but essentially it had a multi-ton boulder sitting on top of it. Here's the bedrock, here's a boulder sitting on top of it, and that piece of jade was wedged right in here. And divers had passed it up. It had crowbar marks on it. Also, it was kind of not the best quality jade. It is green, but it's pretty C grade. You can't make anything out of it, and it's got a lot of rind on it and everything. By any means, it's not an amazing piece of jade, but it was pretty, right? And so I had been swimming past this piece for a while, and I know a number of other divers that had been swimming past the piece for a while. And I was free diving, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take a closer look at this piece. And I went in there and I realized that it wasn't actually wedged. It was wedged with a little bit of gravel and sand underneath it. So for 4 hours while freediving, I took the tips of my fingers and just went like this underneath that stone and kind of moved the sand and the gravel until finally the stone just went, it moved just a little bit. And then I was
4
able to
hours?
actually move the
4
stone out of that hole that it was in. And then I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, no, like, no wonder everybody left this. It's not that great of a piece," which was exciting for me because there's like I said, there's not very few big pieces left out there. And, it was cool to have a big piece, and it was pretty in my eyes. So,
Is that
I
what
was kinda near.
inspired this carving?
Yeah, yeah, it did. It did. I grabbed that piece and I didn't have any way of getting it in. So what I had to do was I took my fins off, put them on shore, went back out and carried that piece on the bottom over multiple dives into the beach. And I finally got it right when I was getting close to the beach. There was a halibut sitting there. Um, right next to my stone. I put my stone down, swam up to the surface, was on the surface for a couple minutes, swam back down, and there was just a halibut sitting right next to the stone, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like a halibut! There's very seldom halibut up there," and I was like, "Cool." I kind of had a little debate: do I take it? Do I not? And I decided to grab it for dinner, so I went and I grabbed my spear gun. Came back, the halibut was still there. So that was a more successful dive where I was able to grab dinner and have a little display stone. Again, I drew some inspiration from that experience. It was really cool being able to find a halibut there. So that was a halibut that I carved, and it was actually a commissioned halibut for a very talented halibut diver by the name of Mike Weber. He's also a very talented jade diver.
So what normally inspires your carvings? Like, what inspires the artwork?
Um, A lot of ocean experiences because I think I spend the majority of my time or my fun time in the ocean, and it really inspires me and it humbles me a lot. And as much time as I do spend in the ocean or others spend in the ocean, we only get to see little glimpses of it. It's such a wonderful alien world that if you get these glimpses into this crazy alien world that is so different from everything on land, like that just inspires art. I mean, I think anybody who's been to the ocean or even been to the aquarium is just awestruck. And if they're any kind of artist or creative person, it's hard not to draw inspiration from those kind of experiences. These are some photos that have taken that right there is a sea slug that is only like a half-inch long. You know, they're tiny, but once you get a magnifying glass on it and look at it, or a macro lens, you're like, oh my gosh, that's alive. That thing's just crawling around, like doing whatever it does. You know, it's amazing. So, yeah, to be able to have that kind of inspiration for what I'm able to do in the carving world has been a blessing for sure.
What's the hardest part about being a jade diver?
Um, finding the jade. That's the hardest part for sure. You know, okay, the waters a warm day is like 55, a cold day is like 47 degrees Fahrenheit. That is freezing. Like you will get hypothermia if you don't have a thick wetsuit. So I'm wearing a 9 millimeter wetsuit, 9 millimeter top, 9 millimeter bottoms. That's 18 millimeters in the chest. And if you're scuba diving, you have about 80 pounds of gear, and the majority of the places that you're going to dive anywhere on the Central Coast are going to have a big cliff. And the popular places for finding jade have about a 200-foot cliff, and they're not like a nice paved like stairway down. It's like a landslide that kind of has a trail on it, kind of thing. And then you get down to the beach or the rock entry or whatever it is, and you get in the water, and it's, you know, in theory it's as simple as, okay, go find the green rock, but you look under there and all the rocks are green, and there's seaweed everywhere in your face, and the ocean's pushing you back and forth and left and right, and you know the visibility may not be good, it may be super murky, and you know hours go by of checking hole after hole, or gravel patch after gravel patch, or cobble field after cobble field, and you just aren't seeing anything, you know. And another part is too, it takes a really trained eye to be able to identify, with all that going on, to be able to identify what the jade looks like underwater, because the pieces that you're seeing there have all been cleaned up. I'd soak them in vinegar to get all the seaweed and the algae off. But when you first find them, a lot of the times it'll be just a tiny little streak of green in this big, you know, view, 180-degree view that you have with kelp and seaweed going around. And, you know, once our water's fairly murky, and once you get 10 or 15 feet under, you lose all that color. Even if a rock is bright red, 15 feet below, that rock's going to be some kind of shade of green. So there's a lot working against you in the jade diving world. But that being said, you know, as a recreational diver, or sometimes I guess, yeah, I'll call myself a recreational diver. It is some of I've done a lot of types of diving, and it is some of the most difficult, physically and in a way mentally challenging diving that you can do, which is kind of some of the draw of it, for the California or just rough cold water divers that have put in a lot of time and effort. It's just another little tangent to go down, you know.
What are some of the simulants that you might encounter that appear to be jade at first?
So our jade, as I feel like most nephrite jade in the world, is derived from serpentine, which is a similar looking rock. It is a green rock, but it is generally a little bit crumbly, and it's fairly easy to tell on the cliffs because it's jagged, it's rough and crumbly and everything. But once you get into the ocean, those serpentine rocks get nice and tumbled and circular too, and they have a grain to them running through them. The only difference is they're soft, and they may not be as homogeneous as a piece of jade. So there are a lot of rocks under there that are serpentine that you know, with your flashlight or with whatever you're doing, you look at them, you're like, oh my, oh wait, no, that's not jade, you know. Also, our jade comes in a lot of different colors. There's a lot of really dark black jades, or jades that have rinds on them, that may be disguised, that are jade, but you just pass them up. We also have a lot of chert. Chert has really wonderful translucency. We get a lot of green cherts, but it is commonly mistaken for jade. People will commonly find pieces of chert on the beach, and even more experienced eyes, you know, if it's a smaller piece, you'll go, oh, wait a second, no, that's chert. I'm sorry, you know.
Wow.
There's
So
a lot of heartbreakers.
when you see it, how do you know? How do you know it's jade?
Um, It is, again, it's a trained eye kind of thing, just as I was talking about the people who find jade in rivers throughout the world. You kind of train your eye. You see a couple thousand pieces that have been shaped and sculpted by that river system over the years. You kind of get an idea of what you're looking at. Now, nephrite jade itself, it has a grain to it. You know, it's very it can be linear, and you're looking for that grain or kind of edges that are uplifted or really nice rounded edges. The translucency as well. Jade will absorb light because it's translucent, where all the other rocks around it will reflect light. I kind of added this piece in there because we have a lot of different colors of jade on the Central Coast, and that is an example of some of the very rarest. You know, I've been searching, diving, beach looking. I've been doing everything I can to find as much jade, which you know, or my free time, look for jade, and that's my one piece of blue. We have a type of blue
Wow.
jade here. You know, there are blues throughout the world, but it is cool that we have a little. You can find tiny pieces every now and then of blue here in
I didn't realize the blue was uncommon. What's the most common color you encounter of Big Sur Jade?
the most common. We actually have a lot of like dark greens and blacks. A pretty classic Central Coast or Big Sur Jade. You'll see a lot of kind of darker greens with black swirls through it. And that sense, yeah, exactly. That's a great example. That tends to be our most common color.
So, a member in the Jot Discord would like to know how often have you seen vulcanized jades and botryoidal jade? And they want to know if Vulcan jade is softer than other Big Sur jades. So, Marco, actually, could you start by explaining what Vulcan jade is?
Yeah, Vulcan jade is jade that has been stained by the iron content in the surrounding soil or sediment. Generally, it has to be buried, whether that's been in a cliff for a couple thousand years or underwater, deep in sediment for a couple thousand years. Um, the iron content in that soil or sediment will oxidize the jade and turn it this kind of brownish color. You'll get pieces of jade that have in the creases, they'll have a little bit of Vulcan or brown in there. Or you get pieces that are completely encompassed in this rind of brown, orange, red iron staining.
And it's a
Generally,
collector's stone, right? Like it's pretty rare.
yeah, it's fairly rare because you have to find that piece in the time between when it is surfaced from wherever it's been buried and when it gets completely tumbled and all that rind comes off in the ocean. So it's a very specific time in which you need to be able to find a piece like that. Um, and you know, generally our Vulcan jades are more specimens than not. They're going to be a little bit softer because those softer jades tend to absorb the iron content in the soil a little bit more. However, I have seen some very, very beautiful hard pieces of jade cut where they're nice and green and hard in the middle, but they have that iron staining on the outside.
Wow. I bet that makes like incredible pieces of jewelry. Do they get turned into jewelry or do they remain as
They
specimens?
do. Every now and then they'll turn into jewelry. However, finding a piece that is of jewelry quality is exceedingly rare.
And what does botryoidal mean?
That is essentially referred to as bubble jade. We have occurrences of it throughout the world, but here in California, we have a couple occurrences of our bubble jade. There's some specimens from the Central Coast there. They're really beautiful and they're unique. And when they get kind of tumbled by the ocean, they can be interesting, you know. Unfortunately, to a carver or anybody who works jade, they aren't very valuable because there's so much going on in that piece. There's going to be hard spots, there's going to be soft spots, there's no real grain to work with, they tend to fall apart really easily. They're not worth much in the jewelry trade, but they can make cool specimens. Again, they're fairly rare. Those are my two halfway decent pieces of bubble
Wow.
jade that I have that you know,
Marco, can you kind of
abalone.
explain? Some viewers might not realize that jade is treasured as a jewelry item, as an art, a carving item, but then also as like a collector mineral specimen. Can you kind of talk about how Big Sur Jade matters in the collector mineral world?
Yeah, Big Sur Jade is fairly valuable in the collectors or specimen world because one, first of all, it's so difficult to find, and there's very few people that are actually finding it, especially nowadays after years and years and years and years of heavy diving pressure and before the laws were put in place. So there's not a lot of it, and those really decent, high quality pieces that I was talking about that come out every now and then, those ones are few and far between. They're hard to come by. Again, our jade is some of the our jade sculpted by the ocean. It's the only jade in the world that comes from the ocean. So it's not rough and jagged and yeah, it's not rough and jagged like the jade you get from British Columbia or most places around the world. You know, it's rounded. It's beautiful. Um, yeah, I think that combination. Sorry, I'm trying to like rack my brain for specific reasoning, but I think the combination between one, how rare it is and how difficult it is to find, the time and effort that gets put into finding decent pieces, as well as the fact that it's naturally sculpted by the earth, by the ocean, are the two main factors in kind of determining its value on the market. And there's some collectors that are diehard Central California Big Sur Jade collectors. Yeah, there's some really beautiful pieces out there.
You work with a lot of nephrite that aren't from California too, like the Siberian piece here. Did you kind of start out with Big Sur Jade and then branch out?
I did, yeah. So I started out with our Big Sur Jade because it was what I had. You know, I you find enough little pendant pieces. Excuse me. You find enough little pendant pieces, and eventually you're gonna be like, "Huh, I kind of want to drill a hole in this one and wear it." And the next one, you're like, "Well, I want to drill a hole and then kind of like make a little wave in it or something," you know. And then essentially, yeah, then you start carving, and again, I've had really generous mentorship under specifically Justin Barrett, but he taught me from a very early on that so little of our jade is actually decently carvable. So I was carving this chippy, kind of soft, like really difficult to work with Big Sur Jade. And from a carver's perspective, like I was saying, our Big Sur Jade, unless it's that top 0.1%, most of it is just it's a kind of a nightmare to work with. So he was encouraging me to work with some more higher quality jades, specifically Wyoming or Siberian. And when I finally listened to him, it took me a while, but when I finally listened to him, it was a dream. I was like, oh my god, this jade is so homogeneous. It is so buttery to work with. It takes such a good polish. It helped me in my own little world kind of take the next steps that I needed to take to learn how to be a better carver.
Can you tell us about this piece?
Yeah, that piece is a chanterelle mushroom. That's the underside. That's a chanterelle mushroom carving. You know, one of the things about diving for jade in Central California is that our coastline is very rough and very exposed to swell. And the majority of the time throughout the year, it is completely shut down. We go months on end without having a single diveable day in the wintertime. Just too rough. Yeah, it's dangerous to go out on those days. But anyways, so my treasure hunting mindset, we do have mushrooms that grow here. It's a very heavily forested area, and our chanterelle mushrooms are a very sought after mushroom in the area. So after a couple of years of just kind of recreationally going out and finding chanterelles here and there and cooking them up for dinner, I had this really beautiful kind of like honey-esque Siberian piece, and I was like, you know what? Kind of want to carve a chanterelle. I was really inspired by the beautiful kind of waves and edges and folds in the edge of the chanterelle mushroom.
It's such a beautiful piece. And then we
Thank you.
have to talk about my favorite. I love this piece so much. Tell us
Thank
about
you.
Squish.
So Squish, Squish was carved for the Monterey Jade Festival carving exhibition in 2025, this past year. And the past 2 years, you can kind of see there's a little museum wax on his butt. It's not, it's just, I swear I polished that part. But it was carved for the exhibition this year, and two previous years I had done my own iterations of an abalone shell building upon itself, because abalone was very inspiring to me and kind of helping me learn how to dive. So I kind of did my ode to that, but I wanted to do something different this year, and seeing carvers do things with eyes were really impactful. You have Glasby. He's done some really beautiful frogs in the past, and Spangler's done some really beautiful frogs and snakes. And Shane, Zach, and Justin Barrett have these dragons, and I thought the eyes were really cool. So I wanted to do some kind of creature. So I was sitting on that for a couple months, and I watched this show called Scavenger's Reign, and that was a really wonderful animated but artfully done show. I'd recommend it to anybody who's looking for a new show to watch.
Highly
You've watched
recommend.
it, it's a,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
great show. And there was a scene in it where this little alien comes out of a flower and kind of points up at the sky, and that was really inspiring because he was a really uniquely drawn, um, kind of funky little looking alien. And I kind of riffed off of that. I didn't want to copy it exactly. I let that artist do his thing, and I kind of want to take it and chew on it for a little bit and do my own thing with it. So I kind of made it more of a frog-esque type thing. And I had this wonderful piece of Wyoming sage jade that kind of had a little kind of reptilian amphibian skin thing going to it. So yeah, I decided to do a little alien guy sitting there and pointing up at the sky, pointing home.
It's such an impressive piece, Marco. When I saw
Thank
it,
you.
I was really, really blown away when I saw it in the exhibition. And it was definitely one of my favorite pieces that I saw in
I
Monterey.
appreciate
So
that.
kudos, well done on really breathing life into this piece of art. I think that's the difference between a good and a great carver, is that feeling that it's alive, you know? Like sometimes you see creatures that are kind of dull, and I think yeah, I just think it's incredible. I love
Thank you
it.
so much. That really means a lot to me. I know you've seen so many amazing carvings and just pieces of art over the years, and yeah, that means a lot to me. Thanks, Jordan.
So Marco, how can people reach you? How can they buy from you?
So I do a lot of local shows. I live in Central California here. I do a lot of local shows, but I try to keep up on my social media. For my photography, I have my social media. It's Marco_Mazza. And my Jade, it's just Mazza Jade Works. That's Mazza Jade Works, all one word. And I have a website too, both for my photography and jade carving. It's all kind of mushed into one. It's mazzamarco.com. So you can get in touch
In the
with
video
me there.
description, you guys can just click it.
Thank you very much. I am a little backed up on commissions at the moment, for anybody looking, but
What a great
yeah, just
problem to
feel free to
have.
shoot
Oh
me a
my
message
goodness.
and ask me what I have in stock, and I'm happy to get in touch.
Marco, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your stories, and your artwork with the Jot audience tonight. If anybody wants to reach Marco, there are links in the video description. Be sure to follow him on Instagram, shop with him on his website, and go see him at the Monterey Bay Jade Festival in 2026. Thanks so much, Marco.
Thanks for having me, Jordan.